Back in the early 2010s, I started working for a major internet-based company in the UK. The company was expanding, opening a new office in London with a brand new division. When I joined, the office had an office manager and a team leads, one for content and another for SEO search engine optimization. My role, I was brought in as the development team lead, responsible for building a team of web developers and revamping a portfolio of websites. During my interview, the office manager and the SEO team lead, Andy, asked me technical questions about web development. They wanted to know if certain things were possible, and I confidently responded, yes, of course, or suggested better alternatives. This seemed to impress them, and soon enough, I got the job. At first, everything seemed great. The work was challenging but rewarding, and I was busy both managing my team and redesigning multiple websites. However, as time passed, small red flags began to appear, red flags that all pointed toward Andy. Andy, the SEO team lead, had a habit of trying to control how my team did things. He often approached me with demands, insisting that I implement changes exactly how he wanted them. But I wasn't a yes man. If something didn't make sense from a development standpoint, I pushed back and explained why his ideas weren't practical. Andy didn't like this. After every disagreement, he would storm off to the office manager and complain about me. Fortunately, the office manager trusted my expertise and usually sided with me. After all, I was the web development expert, not Andy, but this only made things worse. Andy became increasingly frustrated that he couldn't control me, and I could tell that he saw me as an obstacle to his own ambitions. As the months passed, his resentment grew, and eventually, he decided to do something about it. A year into my time at the company, my team and I had been working tirelessly onto major website projects. These websites were crucial for the company's business, and I was scheduled to present them to the board of directors before they went live. The night before my presentation, I arrived at my hotel near the company's head office and decided to do one final check on the websites. That's when disaster struck. I discovered a major bug that severely affected functionality. This wasn't just a small issue, it was something that could ruin my presentation if not fixed immediately. Panic started to creep in, but then my senior developer, Johnny, stepped up. He was back at the London office, and together, we worked through the night, me from my hotel room and Johnny from the office, debugging and fixing the issue. Finally, at 7 a.m., we solved the problem. I had 0 hours of sleep, but I was ready for my meeting. At 10 a.m., I walked into the boardroom, exhausted but prepared. The CEO, who I had met a few times before, immediately noticed my condition and asked if I was okay. I explained the situation, how we had discovered the bug, and worked through the night to fix it before the presentation. To my relief, the board was impressed. They loved the new websites, and at the end of the meeting, the CEO personally thanked me and told me to get some rest. I returned to London, feeling accomplished. My team had pulled off something incredible, and to celebrate, I treated them to a well-earned lunch. The office manager later organised an office-wide night out on Friday to mark the occasion. At this point, I had no idea that this celebration would trigger a chain of events that would change everything. The night out started at a fancy bar, then moved to a small club. I stayed for a while but left early to catch my train home. Everything seemed normal until Monday morning. When I arrived at the office, I immediately sensed tension. My colleague Emma, the content team lead, was confused too. Then, all the team leaders were suddenly called into a meeting. Inside the small conference room sat the office manager, 2 members of HR from the head office, Emma, Andy, and me. The atmosphere was heavy. HR wasted no time getting to the point. There has been a complaint made against Johnny. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. According to HR, a member of the SEO team, Mark, had called Andy on Friday night, claiming that Johnny had made racist comments while at the club. Andy had then reported this to HR, demanding action be taken immediately. Emma and I were shocked. This was completely out of character for Johnny. He was a dedicated professional, a kind-hearted person, and I had never once heard him say anything remotely offensive. HR conducted interviews throughout the day, speaking with everyone who had been at the club. By the end of the investigation, there was no evidence that Johnny had said anything inappropriate. No one could corroborate Mark's accusation. It was his word against Johnny's. However, Andy was relentless. He insisted that Johnny be fired, declaring that we can't have someone like that in our office. Emma and I exchanged glances. Andy's eagerness to get rid of Johnny seemed excessive, almost desperate. HR ultimately decided against firing Johnny due to the lack of evidence, but they issued him a warning, advising him to be mindful of how his words could be interpreted. It wasn't fair, but at least he kept his job. 2 months passed. Though Johnny had moved on, the story of his false accusation spread through our small office of 12 people. Then, one afternoon, a member of the content team pulled me aside. "I overheard Andy and Mark talking," he said, lowering his voice. "You need to know this. We moved to a private meeting room, and he laid everything out. Andy and Mark had planned the entire thing. The racism accusation was completely fabricated, a calculated move designed to get Johnny fired and damage my credibility as a team leader. The plan had been simple. Accuse Johnny of racism, get him fired. Use Johnny's dismissal as proof that I wasn't fit to lead my team. It was a deliberate attack. On Johnny, on me. I was furious. My blood boiled, and if this were a cartoon, steam would have been shooting out of my ears. My first question was, why didn't you tell HR during the investigation? The content team member sighed. I did. But it was my word against theirs. HR didn't believe me. I clenched my fists. Andy and Mark had almost succeeded in ruining an innocent man's career. They had nearly destroyed my reputation as well, but now I knew the truth. And there was no way I was letting this go unpunished. I thanked the content team member and walked back to my desk. My mind was racing. If I was going to take them down, I needed a plan. A perfect, undeniable, and devastating plan. Revenge was coming. After learning the truth about Andy and Mark's plot, I knew I couldn't just let it slide. They had nearly destroyed Johnny's career and, by extension, my own over petty office politics. If they were willing to go this far, who knew what else they were capable of? But I wasn't about to confront them recklessly. If I wanted real revenge, I needed to be smart. I needed undeniable proof of their wrongdoing. So, I watched. I kept a close eye on the SEO team's activities. I observed their work, their conversations, their habits. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, but I knew that if they had pulled something like this once, they were likely to slip up again. And then, one day, I got my golden opportunity. Our office was in a 3-story building. The main staircase led to doors on each floor, and there was also an exit to the street. Occasionally, I would step outside for a quick smoke break, partly to clear my mind, partly to distance myself from the toxic atmosphere Andy and Mark had created. One afternoon, as I stepped into the stairwell, I saw Mark standing by the exit, on his phone. The moment he saw me, his face went pale. He hesitated, but he couldn't just stop talking mid-sentence, so he continued his call as I walked past. That's when I overheard something interesting. From his side of the conversation, it sounded like he was talking to a school or university. He was asking about enrollment, visas, and the application process. Something about the call felt off. I didn't know why at the time, but something about the way he was asking those questions triggered a suspicion in my mind. A few days later, I had to travel to our company's head office for a meeting. While there, I decided to bring up my suspicions with our new office manager, who had recently transferred to the head office. I overheard Mark making a strange call about school enrollment and visas. I said casually, "It might be nothing, but maybe the company should check if his work visa is still valid." The office manager raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'll look into it." At the time, I didn't know what would come of it. Maybe nothing, maybe everything. A week passed. Then, suddenly, Mark stopped showing up to work. No explanations, no announcements. He was just gone. I asked around, and soon enough, the truth came out. Mark had been fired with immediate effect because his visa was no longer valid. Apparently, he had been in the UK on a dependent visa through his wife, who had been a student. But once her course ended, their visa had expired, and Mark had been scrambling to find a way to stay in the country. That's why he had been making those calls. He had been trying to enroll in a fake college, one of those shady institutions that existed only on paper, so he could renew his visa. Unfortunately for him, the company wasn't interested in sponsoring a work visa for him. And with no legal way to stay, Mark was forced to leave the UK entirely. Just like that, he was gone. The moment I learned the truth, I pulled Johnny aside. I told him everything, the fake racism accusation, the setup, and how Mark had ultimately gotten himself fired and deported. He was stunned. I can't believe they would go that far, he muttered, shaking his head. I'm sorry, I said. They targeted you to get to me. That was my fault. But Johnny wouldn't hear it. None of this is on you. You defended me, and honestly, knowing Mark got what was coming to him makes me feel a hell of a lot better. I nodded, one down, one to go, because Mark was just part of the problem. The real mastermind behind all of this was Andy. And I wasn't done yet. With Mark gone, the office atmosphere shifted. The SEO team had lost a member, and whispers of his sudden departure spread quickly. No official reason was given, but the content and development teams, especially Johnny, knew the truth. But Andy, he was still here, and while Mark had been his pawn, Andy was the mastermind. He had orchestrated everything: the false accusation, the attempt to get Johnny fired, and the scheme to undermine my leadership. If I let him stay, he'd find another way to come after me. He needed to go. Andy's biggest weakness was his arrogance. He thought he was untouchable, that he could manipulate his way to the top. He believed that if he wanted something, he just had to make enough noise until he got it. I decided to use that against him. Over the next few weeks, I watched him closely, just as I had done with Mark. I listened in on his conversations, tracked his work habits, and gathered every piece of evidence I could find. And then, one day, I got exactly what I needed. One of my responsibilities as a development team lead was to ensure that the company's websites performed well. That meant tracking visitor numbers, bounce rates, and other key SEO metrics. One afternoon, while reviewing our site analytics, I noticed something strange. Some of the reports Andy had submitted to head office didn't match the actual data. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a miscalculation. But as I dug deeper, I realized that Andy had been fabricating numbers, making it look like the SEO team's strategies were driving more traffic than they actually were. In other words, he had been lying to upper management to make himself look good. Bingo. With this information in hand, I contacted the office manager at head office. I didn't directly accuse Andy of anything. I simply expressed concerns that some of the SEO reports weren't aligning with real traffic data. The office manager thanked me and promised to investigate. 2 weeks later, the hammer came down. HR launched an internal audit of Andy's reports. It didn't take long for them to confirm the falsified data. And once they realized that Andy had been deliberately deceiving the company, there was no saving him. Andy was fired on the spot. I wasn't there to see it happen, but according to Johnny, Andy completely lost it when he was confronted. He tried to argue, to shift blame, but the evidence was too overwhelming. By the end of the day, he was packing up his desk. With Andy and Mark both gone, the office felt lighter. The tension that had plagued the development and content teams disappeared almost overnight. Johnny, relieved to finally have justice, was promoted 6 months later. As for me, I stayed at the company for another year before moving on to a better position elsewhere. But before I left, I made sure to leave a clear message for anyone else who might try to pull the same kind of stunt. I don't let things slide. You mess with my team, I will take you down. With Andy gone, the office finally found peace. The tension that had once poisoned the air vanished overnight. No more whispered accusations, no more manipulations. No more petty power struggles. For the first time in a long time, work felt good again. Johnny thrived in his role, gaining more responsibility and respect from the team. Emma, relieved that the toxicity was finally gone, doubled down on her efforts to make the content team even stronger. And as for me, I kept my head down and did what I always did, my job. But I wasn't done yet. A week after Andy's departure, I received an email from him. "I know it was you. You think you won, but you haven't. People like me always land on our feet." I didn't respond, but I did smile. Because Andy was wrong. People like him don't always land on their feet. Eventually, they trip over their own arrogance. And when they do, there's no one left to catch them. 6 months passed, and Johnny was promoted to a senior role. I stayed on a little longer, ensuring that the damage caused by Andy and Mark was fully undone. But as much as I enjoyed my team, I knew my time at the company was coming to an end. When I handed in my resignation, the CEO personally thanked me for everything I had done. He didn't know about Andy and Mark's schemes, not the full extent, anyway, but he knew the company was better off because of the work I had put in. And that was enough for me. People often ask me if I feel bad for what happened to Andy and Mark, if I regret setting their downfall in motion. My answer is always the same. I regret that Johnny was falsely accused. I regret that my team had to suffer because of petty office politics. But do I regret what I did to Andy and Mark? No. Because in the end, they dug their own graves. I just handed them the shovel.